Fellow cardboarders, welcome back, and a warm welcome to all the new subscribers. As of the filming of this video, we are only 9 days away from the Christmas holidays, and I thought to myself, why not build a kind of Christmassy deck? Obviously you can play this year-round. This is not a Christmas-focused deck, it's just a solid deck that you can build, but the colors and the theme of the deck certainly remind of the Christmas season, since it is a red and a green deck, as well as the fact that we are playing many snow cards and snow basic lands. One interesting fact about this deck in its entirety, before we look at the cards I put into this deck and at the commander as well, is that this is only built of commons, so you could build an even stronger version of this deck by putting in uncommons and rares and mythics, of course. But I also wanted to challenge myself to see how strong I can build this deck when I focus it around commons. So this deck is Pauper legal. It has an uncommon legendary as a commander. In pEDH, the Pauper version of commander, you could even build it with a non-legendary creature, but I wanted it to be legal also around standard EDH players, so I chose a legendary creature, a legendary uncommon, to build this deck, and the rest of the cards are all commons. And another wonderful fact about this deck is that this deck actually costs around only like 10 bucks to acquire all of the cards. And most of the cards, if you've been around in MtG for a while now, you will probably have lying around as well. So you probably don't have to pay much to get the cards together. But now onto the deck and the commander. Let's look at Svella here, the Ice Shaper. She costs 1, a red and a green. For 3 you can tap her to create a colorless snow artifact token, which are these here, which you can tap to add a mana of any color. And then for 8, which is the ability we are also building this deck around, you can tap her and look at the top 4 cards and cast any spell from among them without paying the mana cost of the spell. And then put the rest of the cards back onto the bottom of the deck. So the idea of this deck is to ramp ahead real fast. Ramp with Svella, your commander, as well. So you try to bring her out, turn 2 latest, and turn 3 you tap her to create even more mana. And later down the line you try to cheat into play some thicker creatures that also have Cascade and give you some more value out of your revealed cards from the top of the library. I sorted the deck into 5 different piles, so this is just the commander. We have the ramp pile, we have the removal pile, the card draw pile, the rest of the cards pile, and the land pile. And we're gonna start with the ramp pile. I put in 15 ramp cards. There are some that are able to be put into multiple categories. So there's, for example, some ramp boy that also draws as a card, and I put it to the card draw pile. So let's look at the druid here. That's a Llanowar elf that just creates colorless but snow mana. It's a 1/1. We're playing the Arbor elf, who is able to untap any forest, which is nice if we have a forest enchanted with some enchantment that allows us to create even more mana when we tap the mana. And it also is able to untap some common dual lands. Next up we have the Caryatid here that will at the beginning give us 1 mana, and later down the line, if we have a bigger beater on the board, even 2 mana when we tap the tree. We have the Seeker here that untaps a creature. The idea is either to untap, for example, this Caryatid here to ramp up even faster, or untap Svella to actually either get a mana rock and the ability, or even the ability twice if we have that much mana. So this card is quite versatile. Rime Tender here as well. Either we untap some snow creature or a basic snow land, or the snow commander here. Very useful. Got the usual Steve here. We can chump block and just sack it later, and also ramp us ahead. Some lesser known creature, you could put this into the card draw pile as well, is this elf here who adds green to our mana pool, and we can sack him to draw a card. Got the Druid here, which is really nice from Dragon's Maze. Also has the Llanowar Elf effect, just gives us a green. But whenever we tap it, we can deal 1 damage to each opponent. So this could accumulate quite a bit of damage. Keep in mind we have creatures that also untap him. So for example, the Seeker here can untap him and the Druid will deal 2 damage each turn. So throughout the game, this could easily deal like 5 or 10 damage just by tapping and adding mana to our mana pool. Got the big Elvish boy here, who adds 3 mana to our mana pool and is a great target for our Svella here when we cast him for free and also ramp up 3 manas ahead. If we have him on our starting hand, we could even cycle for a forest if we want to and thin out our deck. Next category, some classic ramp commons like Harrow here, Kodama's Reach. You could also put in Cultivate. I just didn't have one left over actually, so but also no problem because we just have enough ramp cards in our deck. So you could put in and Cultivate and replace it with any other card if you want. Skyshroud Claim, also a great card if we cast it for free. Keep in mind this one can be used at instant speed, so you need a blocker. You tap Svella at instant speed, get a thick blocker out. You want to ramp ahead at the end of a turn just before your turn and you still have the 8 mana open and want to tap her. You could just ramp up ahead for another 2 mana at sorcery speed, but at instant speed. So this one is not restricted by any casting restrictions. So creatures can be cast, lands can be played, sorceries can be cast, you name it. We can even wipe the board at instant speed if we want, because there are some Pauper board wipes we're going to look at in a sec. Got the Wild Growth here, the land I mentioned earlier that we might want to untap with the Arbor Elf to get 2 manas out of, so that's useful. Commander Sphere if we want to draw another card when we sack it, useful. Got a Tanuki here, who is either a big boy and tramples, which is useful, or for 3 mana we can ditch it and ramp ourselves. So this is a better and power-crept version of the Krosan Tusker. He has trample, is cheaper, and has the same stats and ramps into play. So, sorry pig, you're not in the deck. Let's look at our removal pile. I think I also put in 15 removal cards. Got Hull Breach here, which lets us remove an artifact and enchantment, so we could even remove both, which is great for just 2 mana. We got our, I think, first Cascade card here, which is also a artifact enchantment remover, but also lets us cascade, and for 5 we can find something for 4 or cheaper, which we're also gonna cheat into play at instant speed. Mask Vandal, just a great common card. Changeling has all the creature types and even exiles an artifact or enchantment for the low cost of us just removing a creature from our graveyard. Something died. We don't really care about recursion here. I think I have 1 or 2 recursion cards, so the rest of the creatures just can go. Return to Nature also lets you exile a card, so it's a better naturalize. Got Wilt, also a better naturalize. It's instant speed and also has cycling if we don't need it. Then we get into our exile category here. Introduction to Annihilation. We can exile any non-land permanent for just 5 and its controller draws a card. And then we have Scour from Existence that exiles any permanent. Cheated out with Svella, just great. Then we look at our board wipes. If you thought Pauper does not have board wipes, you were mistaken. I actually play 3 in here. Swirling Sandstorm. If we have Threshold, which is not hard to achieve in Commander, that means 7 or more cards in our graveyard, we deal 5 damage to each creature without flying. So flyers we cannot really deal with, so we have to probably exile them, but any ground creatures, when we want to get rid of them, that's the card to go to. Got the Bloodfire Infusion, which can deal even more damage. So in the best case scenario, it's a Blasphemous Act as a common. We enchant any creature I control with this one, and for 1 red we sacrifice the enchanted creature and it deals as much damage to each creature equal to the power of that creature. So if we have a 13 power creature, we just have a Blasphemous Act at instant speed, might I say so. Everyone knows it's out, but it's quite brutal what you can do with common cards, and which is what I like so much about the Pauper format is that there are such nice and interesting combinations and challenges to try to achieve what you normally just are able to simply achieve with a rare like Blasphemous Act, and this is so interesting and cool that this exists and also does pretty much the same. We have our third board wipe, which just strictly destroys all the enchantments, and we're not playing that many. And if our opponent is also not playing many of the enchantments, we just are able to cycle it and draw another card for it. Next up, Icefall, some land destruction cards, which also has Recover, which is, I think, an effect we have never seen after the Cold Snap expansion, which is if a creature is put into our graveyard after this is in the graveyard, we can pay double red to put this card back into our hand. So we get Icefall back and we're able to destroy another artifact or land. If we don't do it, Icefall gets exiled. Very interesting and quite unique, might I say so. Rubble Reading. I think this is our only real scry card in here for top deck manipulation, which is quite hard to do in Gruul colors. So we are able to destroy a land and scry 2, and we leave something big for Svella to cheat and to play. Or if we just hit 2 lands and we don't need any lands, we just scry them down, hoping to get some thick beater later on. And then we have the Moss here, which also destroys a land and ramps us ahead, which is quite mean, but well, we're only playing commons, so let me play a couple of mean cards as well. Abrade, just a very useful card. Not much to say about that. And we have Lingify, which is our Song of the Dryads as a common card and can just straight up remove a commander and turn it into a 0/4 tree folk with no abilities, or any other strong creature. Can even deal with Blightsteel Colossus if we're not playing any Pauper cards with this one, but obviously we can also just exile it. Anyways, solid card. And then we're playing a couple of card draw cards, and I think it's about 9 of these, and you just saw like 2 or 3 other cards that can also draw cards, and then we have the cycling cards. So roughly about like 10 cards that can cycle and draw another card to replace them. We are playing the new Lost Caverns of Ixalan dinosaur here, which later on will draw us 1 or 2 cards if we don't need that many lands anymore, and we have a whole bunch of icy manoliths, and is generally just a 6/5 thick boy with trample, and if we have it early on we can just cycle it. Bonder's Ornament lets us draw a card, and any other player who also has this artifact. I actually am not that deep into Pauper, I don't know how many Pauper players are playing it. Nonetheless, I think it's a solid card and lets us regularly draw a card, or if we don't have the mana open, we can just use it as a mana rock. This is the Llanowar elf, the elf I was talking about that lets us draw a card when it enters. So it costs like 3, but it still produces mana, and cheat it into play with Svella is just a solid card draw and replacement card. Snake Umbra lets us regularly draw a card when we deal damage with the enchanted creature, also adds +1/+1 and totem armor. So if we want to protect any thick beater here or our commander, we can do that with this one. Then we are playing a couple of monarch creatures, which is the hireling here, which cannot attack unless your opponent is a monarch. So we're mainly playing it for the monarch crown, and we're gonna get them back most of the time if our opponent is able to steal it by hitting with our big tramply creatures. We are also playing the Commodore, which also lets us be the monarch and also has trample. We're also playing with the Initiative, which is similar to the monarch ability, regularly giving us some value. We're also playing the Throne Guard here that also lets us be the monarch, and even more elves that also lets us become the monarch and can block another creature as long as we are the monarch. So 5 creatures that let us be the monarch or get the initiative. There is another red creature I would add from the Baldur's Gate expansion, which I just didn't have. So if you want to play more with the initiative, just add that. we are hitting into our big pile here of other cards that I just couldn't put into these categories. We're going to look at some thick creatures here, some Cascade boys. We have the Colossus here that straight up has Cascade. So if we are able to put it out with Svella, or if we have the 8 mana and have this one in our hand, hard casted, we get 2 cards, this one and a second card that we are going to play for 3. Boarding Party, same here. We get something for 5 or less. And it also has haste and is a 6/3. Got the Altasaur here. Same here, 6/5, reach, trample, and cascade. The best is when you are able to just go down the line and cast this, then this, then this, but most of the time that won't happen. But if it happens, it's great. Next up, we have some big Eldrazi's here. Annihilator 2 and attacks each turn if able. 8/8 for 8, solid big card. Devastator here. A 8/9 trample, also quite solid. Got a Rust Goliath. We could play it for 5 as a 3/5 or play it for 10 as a 10/10 reach trample. With Svella, we're not paying anything except for 8 to activate her. And we're just gonna get the 10/10 reach trample for free at instant speed and surprise an opponent with that. Border Branch Golem, same here. We're not gonna play it for the prototype ability, but most of the time for its full mana value to get 6 life and a 6/5 boy. Gotta fix the sleeve here for a sec. There we are. Then we have the Thunder Colossus here. Is it Thunder Steel? I don't know. Show it on screen. We're paying 7 for a 7/7, trample and haste, and it just has crew 2. So even our Svella could crew this, but most of the time we want to create more rocks. But 2 random dorks could just crew this creature and we're gonna hit with a hasty 7/7 trample. Another 7/7, a Greater Sandworm. It has cycling if we have it in hand early, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Solid card. Playing the End here, which also has cycling and slipped out of the sleeve, I don't know why. And it has reach, is a 5/7 for 6. And when it enters, we're gonna get a food token. Also playing the Oliphant here, so you see 2 Lord of the Rings cards, which could be replaced if you're not the biggest fan of the Universes Beyond cards. This one has trample and gives another creature trample, and also has mountain cycling for the early stages of the game. We're playing the Ice Hydro, which is an interesting creature. For double snow mana, and we're playing enough, it gets +2/+0 and indestructible, and it taps. So the idea is either you attack, and if no one blocks it, you can just pump it up real hard and just, you don't care that it gets tapped again, it's still tapped, and it beats for even more damage. Or you block with it, and it is declared as a blocker, you pump it, and it gets tapped, but it's still blocking and dealing damage, and is indestructible. So this creature will stick around for quite a while. Cinderheart Giant. This one, when it dies, deals 7 damage at random to any opponent's creature. Solid card, not much to say. Got the Altasaur here, another Lost Caverns of Ixalan dinosaur, which deals 2 damage when tapped to each opponent, or we just hit for 4 with the reach. You see, we have a couple of reach creatures, but not that many that we could really deal with flyers, but that is one of the options we have. This Altasaur here, playing the Bristleback that puts into play another 3/3 dinosaur and has cycling as well. This one could potentially end the game, surprisingly, gives double strike and also trample when the creature is really big. We have the Ivy Lane Denizen that continuously makes our creatures bigger and our commander potentially. Then we are playing 3 creatures that return creatures or permanents back to our hand, and the idea is to return probably a Cascade creature back to our hand to get the effect again. So this one enters and we return a creature to our hand. Then we have the Hornkavoo, which is quite big for 2 mana, a 3/4, which does the same, returns a red or green creature back to our hand. These at instant speed could also save a creature from a potential board wipe or removal. So if we are able to cheat them into play with Svella, we could even save a creature if we wanted to. And the statue also forces us to return any non-land permanent to its owner's hand. We are playing 2 cards that can just straight up save a creature, either our commander or some big stompy boy that we want to save. These two are there for that. And then we're playing these two cards that can manipulate the top of our library. Reclaim at instant speed. We could just put our best card back on top of our library and for 8 cast it for free. And the Darksteel Pendant is able to regularly look at the top of our library, and then we are able to choose if we want to keep it up there, probably draw it later, or cast a card for free from the top of our library. And it's indestructible, which is a nice upside. This one is not an uncommon. It was originally printed in Visions, and the Ranger was a common back then and is now an uncommon. And this one is just able to untap our Svella again by returning a forest back to its owner's hand. So if we have enough mana rocks out and enough mana out, we could just return a forest. Maybe we didn't even play a land, we can play it again. It can even return a tapped land again, and we're able to tap it once more for more mana. And we either untap our biggest creature, also at instant speed, or our Svella to do her effects again. This is an interesting fog, especially at instant speed with Svella, but also hard casted from our hand. It gives us 1 life point for each creature on the battlefield, so not just ours, and you prevent any damage dealt this turn. Lastly, we're playing Sprout Swarm, which is a repeatable create a 1/1 Saproling token, and it has buyback, so we are going to cast this over and over again at instant speed, creating more and more blockers. And with Convoke, we can even cast it multiple times per turn easily. Keep in mind, you can even use the newly created Saprolings to Convoke, so this can get out of hand really fast. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Lastly, we're gonna look at the lands. There are some nice surprises in here. For example, the Urza lands, all 3 of them to give us up to 7 mana. I would opt to even put a crop rotation in, which I didn't yet, but maybe you want to do that to be able to even easier fetch those 3 lands. This is just a solid dual land here in Pauper, gives us a life, enters the battlefield tapped. We're playing the Hunter's Maze, which we can sacrifice later on to draw a card. I'm gonna play the Cabin here that lets us create a food token. Most of the time we're gonna play the Garden that lets us create a blocker, and indestructible land here. Playing the Forgotten Cave just to be able to cycle our lands if we don't need them anymore. I think we're also playing the green one here. We're playing the Hidden Nursery, which is a land I'm gonna try out. I sadly didn't pull the red version, I would play that as well, which has some kind of semi-cascade by itself. So you sacrifice it for 5 and you discover 4, exiling cards until you hit something that is not a land that costs 4 or less, and cast it for free. And then lastly, we're playing another fetch land that lets us fetch a mountain or forest and gains us 1 life. Sadly, I didn't find any of the dual lands that have both types in my collection, so I would put them in here. I'll show them on screen which ones I mean, to be able to fix your mana even better and also be able to fetch those, for example, with cards like Skyshard Claim, which doesn't have to fetch any basic lands specifically. And lastly, we are playing 7 mountains here and I think 14 forests. Yeah, these are all snow covered, even though it doesn't say them, the art is very snowy. And if someone wants to argue with me, I will just replace them, but I just found them very beautiful and I wanted to play those instead of the real snow-covered lands. This deck in its entirety actually only costs 10 bucks since it's only built with commons. I put all the cards into the shopping wizards of Cardmarket and I would only pay 10 euros and 50 cents for the whole deck plus shipping. But I would bet that most of you would have many of those cards just flying around in your collection. If you don't care about language, you could even get the whole deck for just under 8 bucks. So if you want to support the channel by creating a Cardmarket account, put in CardboardTutor as your referral. So why not try out Pauper for yourself, maybe build this deck or any other one. This is my second Pauper deck and I'm learning to love the format more and more, since these decks at the table at a casual commander game can be still quite powerful, so don't underestimate them. And I have felt many times that these decks get out of hand at some point and we're playing 3 against 1, the one being the Pauper deck. So give it a try and let me know how your first Pauper game went. By the way, I put the whole deck list into the description if you want to take a look at it. But now I do want to hear from you. Which cards did I miss? What would you put in here? How do you play your Svella Pauper deck? Let us know in the comments below. Lastly, I would love it if you would boop the left button so we can finally reach the 500 subscriber goal, and click the right one here for another awesome video. See you there, stay frosty, and bye bye.